media platforms. It's a big week for the Steelers. They remain the only undefeated team in the NFL, coming off an inspiring, gutsy, gritty win. You can use a lot of those kind of adjectives. 28-24, coming from behind, down 10 at halftime to the Baltimore Ravens, and to win that game 28-24. And you can bet the defense was a lot to do with what happened in that game. There were some big plays in the first half. Bud Dupree with a strip sack of Lamar Jackson. The Steelers recovered that fumble, and that preserved points because they were in the red zone at the time, were the Baltimore Ravens. And then there were going to be some other things going on there with the defense. Robert Spillane. Spillane was one of those guys who made another big play, and boy, did he have a heck of an effort. With 11 tackles, a pick six, 3 tackles for losses, he was all over the place, although the Steelers certainly had a problem with the run attack of the Baltimore Ravens, and that had a lot to do with the fact that Tyson Alualu was out with an injury, also Cam Hayward, and I know both those guys will be the subject of some of the injury updates that Mike Tomlin will give you coming up here shortly. Meantime, next up for them is a trip to Dallas. It's the Steelers in Dallas. You'll see it on KDKA, 425 on Sunday. And the situation there is Dallas has struggled, as you know, losing their star quarterback, Dak Prescott. Andy Dalton went out with a concussion. And so this week was Ben DiNucci. We're not sure who's going to be a quarterback this week, but they still have Ezekiel Elliott. But they are struggling. Mike McCarthy, the man from Greenfield here in the western Pennsylvania area, in his first year as head coach down there, he's got a lot to do down there in terms of rectifying their problems as they fell last week. But the crazy thing about that, they're 2-6. They still have a chance to win the NFC East. It's been that kind of season in 2020. Right now, Mike Tomlin is ready to address the media, so let's go live to the South Side.
Good afternoon. I'll start with a quick injury update on a number of matters. First, we got a couple of guys that have missed some time who are scheduled to work without restrictions this week, which means they'll be available for action. We'll be glad to have them back. Those guys are Derek Watt and Jordan Dangerfield. There were some injuries that happened in game, and player availability will be determined by their ability to work this week and the quality at work. That would be Tyson Alualu with his knee, Cam Hayward with his quad. Mike Hilton continues to work his way back from his shoulder injury. We're more optimistic about Cam Hayward. It's a wait and see regarding Tyson. And again, with the number of those guys being at the defensive line position, obviously we'll be calling on a number of our guys at the depth of that position. They'll have an opportunity to rise up and play quality ball for us. We've seen a lot of that in recent weeks from Robert at the linebacker position. We're going to have an opportunity with guys like Isaiah Buggs and Henry and maybe even Carlos Davis having an opportunity to rise up for us this week in potential replacement of a guy like Tyson and a guy like Wormley who's down with injury. Quickly in review of the game, like I mentioned after the game, I'm extremely proud of some intangible things that were revealed, and I think that's often the case. Every time you compete, you learn a little bit about yourselves or you grow in some ways. The challenges of the game, the adversity of the game kind of facilitates that. And I thought it was far from perfect, but I thought collectively our guys did not blink. No one sought comfort. They hung together and rose. We are excited about where we are. We're excited about winning that football game. We're excited about some of the things, like I mentioned, the intangible things we're able to display in the process of doing so. You know, we've been on a gauntlet, if you will, of late, man, being in some 5-star type matchups and their consequences of that. You get stressed in terms of your core beliefs. You get stressed in terms of performance and performance in high stress situations. And you also get stressed in terms of the quality of depth and as injury set in. And so we've dealt with some of that, and we'll continue to deal with some of that. And we proceed this week with that understanding, and we're preparing with an edge as we prepare to go to Dallas and face those guys in their venue. You know, for us, looking at them, Dallas is a team that's lost, obviously, their franchise quarterback, and us being a group that has been in a similar circumstances of late. As I watched the tape, I got a feeling for what's transpiring there. Initially, there's probably a period of shock where, you know, you're dealing with the reality that you don't have your guy, and then you go about formulating a personality that's going to allow you to develop a winning formula. And when I look at their game specifically against the Philadelphia Eagles last week, that's what I see. I see a defense that got off the bus, that was turnover driven, that was focused on getting the ball. And much like we were a year ago when we were playing with Mason and Duck, we realized that we had to gain a possession. We realized that was to learn to live with our known commodities and really work our tails off to highlight them and lean on them. And so, we're preparing with the understanding that, man, we got to deal with Ezekiel. Open it up for questions.
Bill Lawley.
Mike, will the COVID restrictions that your team is under this week because of the positive test in Baltimore affect your preparation in any way?
It won't be an excuse in any way. I'll say that. We've acknowledged from the very onset of this thing that we got to have a hardcore plan, but we got to be light on our feet. We got to work at learning and preparing in different ways. This goes back to the virtual off season. So we won't be doing a whole bunch of talking about the labor pains associated with this journey this week. We'll be concerned about the performance that's on the other end of it.
Brooke Pryor.
Mike, what did you guys like about Avery Williamson and making the decision to trade for him and bring him into the fold?
We thought it was necessary if we had an opportunity to get a known commodity, one like Avery Williamson that we're somewhat familiar with and somewhat familiar with our schematics, and put him into the fold with as much ball that we have that lies ahead. It was a prudent thing for us to do, and we're excited about having it.
Jerry Dulac.
Hey, Coach, you somewhat answered my question, but how do you expect to use Avery Williamson, and will you have him available on Sunday?
We don't have the answer to his availability. A lot will be determined by the process this week, the teaching and learning process, which will be challenged because of the COVID protocol. We'll be working with him remotely until Saturday, but also some of the other things that are going on around at his position will be a determining factor whether or not we attempt to do that. From a long-term standpoint, we have a vision of him being a third inside linebacker, a guy that's position flexible, a guy that's capable of supporting Robert and Vince and being available if anything should happen to either.
Ray Fittipaldo.
Hey, Mike. Teams are converting a fair amount of second and third and longs against your defense. Those are situations you want to be in. So how do you, rectify that and get better in that area?
We just got to be more consistent in our performance. And it's really as succinct as that. We need to continue to work to put them in better positioning from a coach's standpoint. And we need to continue to be on the details from a playing standpoint. There's really nothing mystical about those circumstances in particular. Usually it's something very fundamentally based.
Tim Benz.
Mike, can you give us an update on the reported competition committee plan to potentially add an eighth playoff team if the regular season games, if some of them are lost? Where does that stand, and do you think that's a good idea?
I don't have a lot of detailed information in that regard. We did have a conference call yesterday and talked about some significant things in terms of playoff structuring and seeding. If some things should develop, and that's the key, if some things should develop, we're just doing our due diligence. There's a lot of people in New York that are working extremely hard behind the scenes to keep all options available to us. Our desire, obviously, is to play a complete schedule, I think 256 games or what have you. But we're putting some components in place that really highlight competitive fairness and really answers the challenge if we should end up there. But that's a big if. And so our focus is working our tails off, not only in terms of staying clean and doing the things that we need to do procedurally from a COVID standpoint, but also just keeping an eye on what's going on globally in an effort. Our desire is to play each and every football game.
Jim Colony.
Mike, Ben talked about ad-libbing in the second half. How much did he really go off the books, calling up, pass routes and plays and so forth? And given its success, might you encourage more of that?
Ad-libbing is a stretch. I think we all understand what that means. And so, more than anything, it's about how we function and the state that we're in and us doing the things that we need to do to produce victory in spite of the challenges that attrition in the game of football oftentimes presents teams. And so that's a challenge for us this week. Oftentimes I say the nameless gray faces that we play are less important, and thus is the case. We better make sure that, we're fortifying our depths and doing the things that we need to do in terms of the guys that have to rise up, that they play at an acceptable level, that we can produce a winning performance.
Joe Rudder.
Yeah, Mike, James Washington got significantly fewer snaps than he has, and Ray McLeod got about 22. Was that a matchup issue?
And also, just from a time of possession standpoint, Baltimore possessed the ball in the game and we didn't. And so there are less snaps to go around for any offensive player that you could suggest. We had a desire to play Benny Snell. Benny Snell has been a quality young, supplementary contributor. He played 0 snaps of offense in the game, for example. I think, Anthony McFarland played 1 snap. When you're not possessing the ball and the other team is, and you're not converting third downs, particularly in the first half of the game, there's going to be a snap scarcity, and you can have that discussion about any individual player, particularly some of those that play a support capacity, if you will, relative to our planning.
Mike Pursuta.
Mike, how did you evaluate your 5 linebacker package? Was that Baltimore specific? And given the challenges of replacing Bush, might you be more inclined to experiment moving forward?
I thought it got the job done. It was situation specific, but to be completely honest with you, it probably had to do more with the lack of Mike Hilton than it did anything at the linebacker position. When we get in our sub package football, Mike is a unique run defender for a guy that plays his position. And a lot of the things that were going on in that game were in 3 wide receiver sets. They were in what you globally refer to as kings. And so the lack of Mike Hilton was significant. And so we did some things to try to level the playing field in that regard. And that probably speaks more to his value than it does, some of the things that were going on at the linebacker position in terms of lack of availability.
Jeff Hathorn.
Mike, how do you prepare for the quarterback position with Dallas, and what were your impressions of Benjamin?
Mark Caboli.
Hey, Mike, historically speaking, the Steelers haven't really used the trade as a weapon over, the history of the organization. Last 3 years have been a little bit different. Why have you guys decided to use that tool to supplement your roster?
We'll utilize all the tools at our disposal, man, to fortify our depths and present the strongest football team. And sometimes different journeys create different challenges, and we're just responding to what we believe is appropriately to the challenges that this journey is providing us.
Will Graves.
Mike, you had an opponent announce that he had tested positive for COVID hours after you played him. Is there, as a coach, is there anything you think the league should do to create a better level of certainty that when you guys play, everybody's okay to go?
Let me be clear here. I'm extremely pleased with the efforts of the National Football League in response to the pandemic and the steps that we're taking continually. And they're continually growing and changing and developing as needed. I have no issue with what we're doing in that area.
Ty Miller.
Coach, there's a lot going on with the pandemic and the election. So how has being centrally focused when it comes to football matters only led to your 7-0 start?
For us, we're not a team that believes in a lot of signage. For those of you that have been around our building, you understand what we mean there. One of the signs that we do hold near and dear is that take the field sign that's on doors leading to our practice field. And it means a lot of things, but it means this: regardless of what's going on in our lives, whether it's global issues or whether it's personal issues, when we walk through those doors, man, we got an opportunity to be singularly professionally focused and to dwell in that. And that's something that we work at daily. I know that's something that I work at daily. Not that we're not sensitive to what's going on in the world and actively engaging in the issues and things that are going on in the world, but for those moments, we owe it to ourselves and to our cause to be singularly focused, and that's something that we work at daily to do.
Alan Saunders.
Mike, you talked after the game about how you thought Buggs had a better second half than the first half. How have you seen him grow since you guys drafted him? And specifically, what have his traits do you think work well at the nose tackle? I know he's played.
Well,
you spoke so complimentarily of Ezekiel Elliott. When you look at what your defense faced in a run game this past weekend, is anything transferable, anything applicable, anything similar, or is this a completely different way of running the ball that the Cowboys run?
Completely different.
Jerry Dulac.
Hey, Mike, just a little clarifying, if you could. When you guys are tested Saturday morning, you get those results Saturday night, and when you get tested before the game on Sunday, you don't get those results till like Sunday night or Monday. Is that correct?
Roughly similar to the things that you suggest.
Right.
You get a 24-hour general turnaround on your testing. Sometimes it's less. So generally your Saturday test comes back Sunday, your Sunday test comes back Monday. Sometimes they come back early.
Joe Rutter.
Do you have to make a decision on Stefan Wisniewski this week, and how's he coming along?
We do and we will.
Brooke Pryor.
Mike, I know you guys are very focused on football and on the on-field product, but with today being election day and a bunch of people getting out and voting, what is your message, or what has your message been to the team about, I know NFL offices and stuff are closed today because of election day. What do you talk about with your team when you talk about voting and being engaged in that way?
You're absolutely right. Today is Tuesday. We're working and planning and we're professionally focused. But we've been talking continually about being active participants in the political process and exercising our right to vote. And so it requires no special meeting or no point of emphasis today. We all know what today is.
Couple more, Mike Pursuta.
Mike, you referenced Gilbert as less than available. You're not expecting him to be in the mix this week?
We'll see. It depends on how his back behaves.
Final one, Tim Benz.
Mike, Randy Fietner last week talked about James Conner, sort of the polish that's showing his game, spin moves, stiff arms, jump cuts. Are you seeing that? Have those skills helped him run hard, but at the same time avoid taking as many direct hits this year, thus aiding his ability to stay on the field?
Physical confrontation is a part of his play. And so I don't think he's avoiding that. And I know, I appreciate that element of his play. He's really finding his rhythm.